Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Podcast, episode number 4, and a bit of a rules special. Yes, sounds very exciting, I'm sure. Coming up over the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about that penalty on Sunday, more specifically whether the rules need to be looked at and there need to be some changes going forward. We'll also be talking about 2021 because there was actually some interesting, or a few interesting tidbits that came out over the weekend that kind of got lost in all that fuss from the penalty on Sunday. So we're going to talk a little bit about that one. Don't forget, if you are watching over on YouTube, you can listen to this on both Spotify and SoundCloud. Links to those are in the description down below. But I'm going to kick things off and get straight on with this and say a very good afternoon to Stuart. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Good afternoon. Have you had an exciting week of angry people?
Oh, it's been dramatic. I'll put it's been very dramatic, but it's got people talking, hasn't it? And F1, it's good to see people talk about F1, even if we don't all agree on what went on Sunday. I might actually just ask you quickly, very, very quickly now, given that I couldn't ask you on Sunday. What overall, taking the penalty aside, what was your take on the Canadian Grand Prix? Did you enjoy it? A good race, bad race, or just a bit meh until we got the penalty?
I thought it was a great race. It was interesting seeing Hamilton and Vettel go head-to-head, which we hadn't really seen this season, to be honest. We haven't really seen Mercedes and Ferrari go head to... Actually, we saw Hamilton and Vettel in Bahrain, but they weren't... It was a slightly different situation there. But yeah, there was tension. There was even tension after the penalty, to be honest, because we were still waiting to see if Hamilton would give it a go. We were waiting to see if Vettel could pull out a bit of a lead and stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I'm glad after a bit of a duff year last year, Canada delivered as it normally does.
Doesn't it feel like forever since we've just had two of the best drivers on the grid flat out giving it everything, trying to win that race, not taking into account the penalty, but just seeing Hamilton and Vettel, I've said it before, 9 world titles between them, pushing each other to the absolute limit to win that race. I can't remember, I might be wrong, somebody might point out in the comments to this that it happened early this season, but I can't remember the last time we really saw that between those two, and I loved it, every bit of it.
Yeah, I really loved it. Right at the front of the race where they belong. It's funny, really. Like, I think a lot of championships when you've got, because I think most championships tend to be fought between two main people over the course of the year. There are some exceptions. And as tracks and races kind of ebb and flow between one or the other having the advantage, you don't always see them fighting each other for the lead. But occasionally you get races like this where the sort of circumstance has forced them together and they have to scrap over the same bit of tarmac to get maximum points. Now they were scrapping together in Bahrain, as I said, when Vettel had that sort of spin all by himself. But I believe at that point Leclerc was still in the lead, so they weren't actually scrapping it for the top position then.
Yeah, he was gone, Leclerc, wasn't he? Let's not go back to that one, start breaking people's hearts again in Bahrain. But yeah, Leclerc had that one in the bag, didn't he, until all that happened. But obviously the thing that dominated Sunday was that penalty, as I referred to it at the start of the podcast. I don't really know what else to call it other than that penalty, to be honest. It's kept people talking ever since Sunday. We're not going to go into it on this one about whether we agree or disagree or whatever. All I will say is you can go back and watch the hot-headed reaction from the race reaction stream on Sunday. Massive apologies for that because I do use some bad language and I don't like to when I'm YouTubing. And also it was very hot-headed and not very well informed. But if you'd like a more informed approach, you can check out the debrief for Canada, which went up on Monday. And basically in that, to be honest, I said by the letter of the law, it's a penalty at the end of the day, whether we agree with it or not. So that's what we want to talk about today, is whether it's maybe time for these rules to be looked at. A lot of people saying after Canada, the FIA need to kind of get their heads together and come up with, I think the term used, what's the term that people keep using? Something along the lines of, he made a mistake and he was punished. Why was he punished for making a mistake? That's not fair. And, it wasn't intentional, so why are they giving him a penalty for it when it wasn't intentional? So intent to mistakes, or intent to mistake is the two terms we're going to use today. Can the FIA and the stewards really open up and say, we're going to start looking at driver intent. We're going to start looking at whether or not that was a mistake? Because perhaps I'm wrong, Stuart, perhaps you'll disagree, but to me, that just opens up a whole can of worms. And if you start opening up the rules to interpretations, you're going to get even more inconsistency.
I mean, that's an interesting point. And I actually, if you look at the FIA explanation as to why they did give him a penalty, it did come down to intent. Obviously, the initial mistake, the initial thing that started the situation was a mistake. He kind of lost the back end. And as he corrected it, went over the grass and had limited control. And you could agree or not with the FIA about this, but their I don't have the exact statement in front of me, but by about the point he was sort of halfway across the track again, once he was on the other side, they saw him he was holding the steering wheel to the left and then he relaxed it to allow the car to drift to the right. And that's what they're using as their reasoning that Vettel made a decision to continue to block Hamilton or not give him as much space as maybe he could. And that's what they're using as saying it was an unsafe maneuver. Now, I don't have as much information as the FIA and or the stewards, or, I'm not, the biggest expert to make these decisions. And my interpretation was slightly different. I still thought it was a bit out of control because he was definitely like fighting the steering wheel all the way to the edge of the track. But that's their reasoning behind it. And I think, there was a very similar reason the stewards, the FIA gave behind taking all of Schumacher's points away in 1997. We're going back a long way, but essentially in the finale, when he rammed Villeneuve, they showed that he made two steering wheel movements. The first was reactionary, but then he had another go, which they considered to be premeditated because he'd already sort of reacted to the first maneuver. So it's a long-winded way of getting around to your actual question, but I think intent should be considered as long as you can demonstrate that intent fairly clearly. And then, so there's going to be this whole grey area. And that's why I think the stewards are very careful to say, well, we saw him do this, we saw his steering wheel maneuver do this. And to that reason, this is why we thought there was sort of intent and he was more in control than he said he was. And I also think mistakes should also be punished if they... So assuming Vettel hadn't had any control at all, which is sort of where I was, and he just span across the grass, but he ended up still ahead of Hamilton. He made a mistake, but just because of the layout of the track, because it was a chicane, because it was sort of downhill, it didn't really cost him any position. Whereas if the track had gone in a slightly different direction, he would have been off onto the grass and Hamilton would have passed him. So I kind of still agree that he probably should have been penalised for that mistake, because he probably should have lost that position if the track just didn't happen to catapult him back in front of Hamilton. Where I disagreed was that it was sort of a dangerous driving. I would have agreed if they'd have said unfairly kept his position after going off the track. I'm not entirely sure I've answered your question, but I've kind of gone on a bit of a journey there.
No, that's all right. It's nice to listen to your opinions on it. It's all been a bit hot-headed over the last week. Well, not even a week, is it? 4 days as we're recording this. So nearly a week when the podcast goes out. But yeah, I completely get what you're saying. It's an awkward one. It's so difficult to call because people think that when you say by the letter of the law it's correct, that you're agreeing with it and that therefore you can't disagree with it. But I'm kind of with you on this. The trouble is, from a steward's perspective and from Vettel's perspective in this case, or anybody's perspective, or any penalty given, Vettel's decision-making, that moment for him is half a second and a half. For the stewards, They're going through frame by frame. It took them 3 laps, I think it was, to come up to that. So what's that? Say a minute 10. So you're looking at 3.5 minutes to come to that decision, going by frame by frame. They've then done it again afterwards. We've all done it and looked at it frame by frame. So when you actually do it that way, it kind of looks like a slam dunk. But what seems to get forgotten, maybe not forgotten in the stewards' room, but seems to get forgotten in general, is that that's a decision that he's got to make like that. He hasn't got 3 minutes to sit and go, right, well, if I do this and do that and do the other, I'm going to avoid this one. So it's I don't like this going through frame by frame, but I understand that the stewards have to. But going back to intent, and you mentioned there a grey area, and it's a grey area I've got written down in my notes here. How do you prove intent, really? Because the only person, it's going to Verstappen in Monaco, for example, only Max Verstappen knows if he saw Bottas there. Only Max Verstappen knows if he intentionally hit Bottas in the pit lane. The stewards can say, we think it is intentional or we think it isn't intentional. But the only way to get around this is to then wait for post-race investigations, get the drivers in the stewards' room and say, was that intentional? But what driver is ever going to stand there and go, oh yeah, totally did that deliberately? None of them are. They're all going to say, nope, it was a mistake, it was not intentional. So this is what I mean when I say that if you open it up to individual interpretation, it's just going to be so inconsistent because ultimately, as I've already said, the only person who knows if something's intentional or not is the driver.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I do agree with that, which is why I think there is this sort of grey area in the middle. I think there's some very, there's some examples where it'd be obviously clear-cut intentional. If someone swerves across the track for no reason, like on a straight, then you're like, well, you just barged someone off the track.
As you've already said, Schumacher 97, that was blatantly, obviously intentional to everybody watching. So
yeah, so there's, and on the other side there is. I think this incident falls into that grey area because, like you said, there's a split second. He's at least somewhat out of control at all points. He's gone off the grass. His tyres are dirty. He's still trying to regain control. he's fighting the steering wheel, and you could argue like he steers this way, he steers that way, or he could just be like still getting the car straightened out. I think normally with this kind of situation, I know we don't really like to have to be sitting around for hours after the race waiting for what the actual result is if there's an ongoing investigation, especially for the lead. But this is the kind of situation where you normally dig into the telemetry and sort of again, it's a very sort of like granular frame by frame type thing. But to kind of be absolutely sure you're making the right decision, I'm with the caveat again that I'm not the expert and I'm not a steward and I don't have all the information. I still feel it hasn't been conclusively proven that that's what happened. So I think intent is important, but yeah, like I said, you need that very clear evidence. Otherwise, you're just going to have these arguments. And I think that's often why the FIA sort of wrap themselves in pages and pages of regulation to sort of say, these are the moves you can't do. And if this happens, then this and blah, blah, which is, I think, was it 2017? I think they brought in like the Max Verstappen rule about sort of exactly what you could do under braking because he was doing a very specific thing. And I don't think they could really necessarily prove he was being deliberately dangerous. So they had to kind of like format the rules in a very specific way to just basically ban that specific move. And then they relaxed it a bit later. But it rather than, like you say, sort of an intentional move across the track to block a opponent, they were like, well, you once you're in the braking zone, you can only move so far, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I mean, I do feel for the FIA in the sense that creating rules that are fair and can be applied and judged is a very tricky thing. And I think we're never going to get to a point where every situation is clear cut and we're all in agreement and no one gets angry. But I think there's room for improvement in terms of clarity and maybe simplification.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I always talk about, I've said this so many times, the channel's nearly 2 years old and I feel like I've been saying it for 2 years. But I would love to see, or think the sport would really benefit from having a team of stewards that go to every event. Now that can be 3, that can be 4, that can be 5, whatever. And then have a driver that comes in and rotates. You have a fresh driver each weekend and maybe they can only do so many races before they have to have so long without one so that there's no talk of bias or anything like that. And at least then you get some consistent decisions in there. The problem is though, no 2 incidents are the same. So even in that situation, you're still going to, yes, there's the potential for more consistency, but every single move is still open to individual interpretation. So it may well be that Steward A sits down after Canada and says that's a penalty, and then a similar decision 2 weeks later, they don't give us a penalty, the same steward, because they might look at it in a different way. Because, for example, Canada and Paul Ricard, great examples, completely different in terms of their runoff areas. So they may say, well, what Vettel did in Canada was dangerous, but if he does that in France because of all the runoff, it's not as dangerous because he's not risking putting an opponent into the wall, as an example. Sort of look at a picture on screen there on the YouTube video of Monaco. That's another great example. Monaco is very different to Bahrain in that respect. So the stewards have got to have some kind of, I wonder if that comes into consideration for them. So that's going to breed inconsistency. But what I would love to see, and I know you've been advocating this, if you like, Stuart, for a long time, I would love to see on their YouTube channel on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, after a Grand Prix, somebody from the stewards panel and a couple of people sat down saying, here is why we came to our decisions this weekend. Because that way, at least the fans can say, okay, that kind of makes sense. Even if they still disagree with the penalty, at least they will have some kind of, as you said, clarity. They'll understand why the stewards are coming to these decisions that they do and why they do differ from weekend to weekend, from circuit to circuit.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if, if not a YouTube channel, then an article that's like illustrated sort of clearly, with like just sort of maybe that top-down illustrations of like where the cars are on the track to show areas, arrows, like a sort of just like a movement diagram, just to explain themselves. And I think on top of that, I know this, like practically it might end up having a limited time to do something like this, because actually the stewards reach a lot of conclusions on the sort of Thursday and Friday because they walk the track and they do their final looks. But I think before the race, probably before the race weekend, if they just had points of notice about the particular track, because they do it with the drivers, they have the drivers meetings, and we sort of used to hear it occasionally because we would know which corners would be punished for running wide, which corners wouldn't be punished for running wide. They would, the drivers would be told certain areas of the track. It's like, don't do this. You're allowed to do this. We will punish you if you cut this corner by even the smallest millimeter. So I think communicating that publicly, with diagrams would be helpful. Something nice and clear and illustrated, and just explain, we're going into the Canadian Grand Prix. These are the corners we're going to be paying particular attention to, and so on and so on. So even going into the weekend, you have a sort of better idea of like how they're approaching this track. Because as you say, each track is very different. Each track has different consequences, and things like running wide. Not every time you run wide, depending on the corner, gives you an advantage. Even though I still kind of think just keep everyone inside the track limits, and that makes it easier for everyone. But still, so yeah, I think they should have that. I also think. I definitely think the rules should be consistent, like within the season. I think they might be able to revise how they approach, moving across the track, running wide, doing all sorts of maneuvers from year to year. I think if they sort of change their mind, if they're like, okay, we're going to relax the rules about certain things, but definitely within the year. And I think it would be useful before the year begins. And again, this is probably too much work to produce a sort of condensed and simplified version of the sporting regulations, and possibly again illustrated, looking at maybe a little bit like the highway code. That's probably quite a UK centric reference point, but so it's a thing fans can reference that isn't going through like a 5,000 bullet pointed legal document, which is what the sporting regulations actually look like. And it's really quite hard to sort of, it's well formatted, but it's, if you ever try and go into the sporting regulations or technical regulations, it's very dense. And if you could just have some reference material so you understand what kind of decisions the stewards will be making and considering going into a race, going into a season, I think that would be very helpful as well. Transparency and clarity, really.
Something like a for people like us, maybe an F1 rules for dummies kind of thing. So it's all very, very simple and to the point. Yeah,
something like that. And if they, change rules from season to season, then just make a little video, a little post about it. Just explain, right? This is no longer allowed, or this is allowed. I think. Because what actually happens is the FIA revise the rules. So if you're someone like me who browses through the actual regulations, you'll see that year on year there will be pink sections in this very, very big thing that looks like a contract. And the pink sections are the stuff that's been revised year to year, which is good. It's highlighted pink, so you can be like, you can check out what's changed, so you can be aware. Now, this is never really like published. So what happens is you have to wait for like journalists to notice these rule changes and decide if they want to bother making an article explaining that something's changed or not. Whereas I think you could be like, well, these are the 4 things that have changed. Let's just make this in language that normal people can understand, or maybe make a video and just be like, these are the things just that are different from last year in terms of what's allowed on the track. It can't be that hard, can it? I'll do it. Shall I pitch something to them?
You definitely should. That is a fantastic idea. I expect you to be sending emails as soon as we finish this. But no, I completely agree. I was going through regulations on Monday, having a look at everything, and it's not even, I understand them. I think everybody would understand, or most people would understand them, but it's all legal speak, and it's all legal. Like Sebastian Vettel was saying, we sound like lawyers when you're going through it all, and intentional and mistake and all this, and if driver A does this, driver B does that, and article this, that, and the other. It just needs to be, if he runs him into the wall, he gets a penalty. And that's such an obvious thing, such an easy thing to say, and not very Formula One. But just something as simple as that. If he leaves the track and gains an advantage, and advantage is defined as this, then it's a penalty. But that's the other thing: time penalties. I think it was a line from the articles that says something along the lines of, if any of the 7 penalties are applied in a race, then it can't be appealed, basically. 7 penalties. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's great that we've got these 5-second time penalties. Could you imagine the fuss if this had happened in 1998 and Sebastian Vettel got a stop-go penalty for that? Imagine the fuss we'd have right now. So it's great that we've got these time penalties, but there doesn't even seem to be any consistency in how they're applied. So if we've got too many penalties at the moment, do we need maybe even get rid of the likes of drive-throughs and things like that? But then you haven't got a more severe penalty. So just sat here completely off the top of my mind then, just chatting about this, it kind of highlights how difficult it must be for the FIA to come up with these year to year.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's too many penalties. I do think you're absolutely right in that. I think maybe there needs to be sort of a consistency about what applies to what. And I know the reason you tend not to see a consistency in a lot of the FIA regulations is because they like to give themselves wiggle room. They like to give themselves grey areas because not every situation is the same. And maybe, one barge into the wall is worth 5 seconds and one barge into the wall is worth 20 seconds. I think you're probably right that the time of drive-throughs is probably over if you can give these very specific time penalties. Maybe just do 5, 10, 15, 20, and then a stop go if you do something terrible. And that way, everybody knows exactly how much time has been lost. You can't like cheat it under the safety car. You've lost 10 seconds. That's your penalty, which is good. It's interesting you brought a stop go because I was thinking about that as well. Like for people who haven't been watching F1 for the last 20 years, drive-through penalties didn't come until 2003. So until that point, like the only in-race penalty you could get was coming into the pits, stopping for 10 seconds, and then leaving the pits without any tire changes or anything. So it would be a drive through plus 10 seconds. That was like the leanest penalty you could get. It was weird, really. That's all we had. And then these 5 and 10 second penalties are only a few years old, I think.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. This is another thing that's being discussed. There is nothing in the rules that allows the stewards or the race director to ask teams to cars to swap position. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's to stop them having too much control over the race. But as a lot of people were saying, why didn't they just get them to swap positions? Why did they have to basically? I think they were still going at it, but it kind of took the wind out of the race, didn't it? Because we knew that Hamilton didn't really have to do anything to win. Whereas if Vettel had swapped position, maybe he'd be able to fight back and the race would be back on. But they don't have the ability to do that, which is interesting, isn't it?
It is. Do you think? I was just thinking then. Do you think they backed themselves into a corner with the way they worded it? Because they said, failed to rejoin the track safely. That's going to be a penalty, whichever way they look at it. If they said left the track and kept a position, or made a mistake and that the way he rejoined meant he kept his position and defended his lead, if he'd have swapped over, they could have then said maybe swap the two cars over. But because they said rejoin the track unsafely, they've kind of penned themselves into a corner with that one, haven't they?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think that would end up my position ended up being, I don't think he rejoined the track unsafely because I don't think he had much choice in the way that he rejoined the track. If it had gone slightly the other way and he hadn't been able to control it as well as he could, and he sort of span around and shot onto the track backwards, then I think it'd be unfair to say you rejoined the track unsafely because he was just spinning out of control. So I think it was sort of a milder version of that, where he was sort of not really in control. And again, if they'd said you gained an advantage by cutting across the track when probably should have lost the position there because you lost control of your car, I probably would have been more lenient. I think the heart of us all being very disappointed is the fact that it took the wind out of the sails of what was a thrilling race at that point, I think. And we were just annoyed that something technical got in the way, but at least they would have understood that more. But even if it had been you gained an advantage, I don't think they can still tell people to swap the drivers back. The drivers have to choose to do that themselves to avoid being investigated. And I don't think, Vettel was in the mind to agree that that's what he should have done.
I think going on to the position swapping idea, if you then, from a fan's perspective, if you get him to give that position to Lewis Hamilton, you've then got an angry Sebastian Vettel that's free to chase Lewis Hamilton down for the win, and you've got an even bigger grandstand finish. I know the stewards can't go, oh, we can't give that penalty because we might get a lot of dislikes on our YouTube video, or oh, we can't not give that penalty because a bunch of fans might be really mad at us. They have to follow the rule book. I'm sure they'd love to be able to say, nope, don't want to do that because it'll ruin the race, but they can't do it. So appeals is something else I wanted to touch on very quickly. Ferrari, apparently, according to the Daily Mail this morning, the BBC have put something out, and a number of others now reporting that they've essentially ish dropped their appeal against the penalty from Sunday. I know, Stuart, I think you said before we start recording this, you've got some stuff prepared to kind of go over what they're actually doing, but for the keeping it basic, at the moment that penalty appeal has been dropped based on what they said, because originally they did say they were going to appeal it. But that was all confusing because the official release that came after the penalty was given was drivers are reminded and teams are reminded they can appeal these decisions, but actually in the rule book they can't. So that just led to, it's going back to that thing you were saying about clarity, that just adds confusion to it, because everyone, you've got experienced reporters going, can they? And you've got Ted Kravitz saying, no, they can't. You've got another reporter saying, well, apparently they can. And then somebody else saying they can't. And it just got so confusing. If you've got seasoned F1 fans and seasoned F1 journalists all disagreeing on whether he can or can't appeal that decision, then that's not very clear to anybody.
Yeah, and the FIA also didn't help themselves by not bothering to step in and clarify what that meant. And I think that, I don't have it in front of me, but the line at the end of the steward's notice with the penalty on it, I think competitors are reminded of their right to. It's something like the right to appeal under certain circumstances or something. And I think that's just like a general note. So it's like I think it's basically saying you can appeal if you can appeal.
Basically, like it's not already like a printed letterhead. Basically, it's just on every single one.
I think so. And it's
out.
Like if this is a penalty that you can appeal, don't forget you can appeal it. So I've sort of been investigating this. I I still don't think they can appeal this. And I don't know if you've gone over this in previous things, but to my understanding, the reason they can't appeal this is because this is technically a stop-go penalty. So if he still had a pit stop left to go, Sebastian Vettel would come into the pits, wait 5 seconds, and then do his pit stop. If he still had a pit stop, he would have to do that. He can't opt out of doing that. If he doesn't have a pit stop, they just add the 5 seconds onto the end. And the FIA being like, having absolutely no nuance on the matter. And I don't know, possibly if that's right or not, but essentially because you could have two people being given the same penalty in the same race, but if one of them, it happened before a pit stop, they would have to take that penalty during the race. They would lose time and positions. And obviously you can't appeal that because you can't turn back time because they've already taken the 5 seconds in the race. It's the same way you can't undo a drive-through penalty. And Vettel, through luck of having his penalty being given after all his pit stops, sort of has this penalty added on afterwards. So the argument is, if this is all making sense, that it would be unfair if you could appeal it just by fortune of not having taken a pit stop, because under normal racing circumstances, in the way it's properly supposed to be taken, you wouldn't be able to undo that penalty. So that's kind of why it can't be appealed. And I still stand by that because I think Ferrari know it can't be appealed because it would essentially be rejected as soon as they took it to the Court of Appeal. So what they are doing is going for a right of review.
Okay.
That's sort of the understanding. This is from Autosport, and I think this is still slim as well. So the idea is competitors can gather the stewards together if they have new and significant evidence available for review, and the FIA can make decisions after that. So I think I can't imagine what new and significant evidence Ferrari would bring to that review, but that pretty much is the only thing left on the table for them.
What happens though if they're successful? It's the way you've put it there. I completely get what you're saying. Imagine a stop-go penalty in a race. You get a stop-go penalty on lap 10 and you're P6 and that drops you to P10 and then you appeal that after the race. How do they know where you were going to end up or where you would have been at that point? You can't then bump everyone down and go, well, he was 6th, so he would have finished 6th.
Exactly.
So you just can't do it. But what... If there's, I don't think they'll be successful in any appeal. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if they're looking at that route and then decide against going down that route as well. Because what are they going to gain from that other than surely the most they can get is the stewards going, all right, actually, maybe we were wrong. Sorry about that. Because what else can they do?
Yeah, and they could end up shooting themselves in the foot if that happens. Because imagine if it happens to Hamilton the next race, and they were like, and stewards were like, "Well, you convinced us that was fine." So no penalty, and then everyone else will be furious because of the inconsistency. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I think this is probably going to go away, and Ferrari will box up their anger and have to live with it like the rest of us.
Hopefully, they'll box up their anger, rock up in France, and absolutely give us one hell of a show, is what we'd love to see between now and the end of the season. They don't sound overly confident. Even Sebastian Vettel was said on the podium, didn't he? This isn't about the championship anymore. So, thanks, Seb. It's been 7 races, mate. Try and keep us interested at least. But yeah, do you think... do I want to ask this question? I do want to ask this question. Do you think drivers and teams should be allowed to appeal in-race penalties at the end of a Grand Prix? My answer, I'll tell you mine straight away, is no, I do not. I know that won't go down well because you're basically going to be waiting based on some weekends. It could be the next race before you have a definitive running order because it might end up in the Court of Appeal and all sorts, and we could end up in situations... trying to think of it, like Hunt versus Lauda's a good example where you're waiting multiple races to get a steward's decision, and then could you imagine that happening after Abu Dhabi? Let's all use our imagination, and we're going to have to. Vettel and Hamilton take it to the final day of this season, and Hamilton gets a penalty for an unsafe return to the track. Why not? He gets a 5-second penalty and then he decides to appeal that and the FIA reject it, but then he takes it to the World Motorsport Council or the Court of Appeal or whatever. It could be well into January before we have our world champion crowned because we won't know. It'll be forever lingering. We'll be preparing for pre-season testing before we know who the world champion is from the previous season. It will be chaos, absolute chaos.
Yeah, I can't imagine that the FIA would let it get to that level because they've got their gala to do, and that's the most important thing. But yeah, I mean, waiting for a championship is the worst possible result, but even waiting for a confirmed race result for more than a few hours is ridiculous.
You
But
know me,
actually,
I
what
like to go
you
to
right?
extremes.
Do you remember 1999, the penultimate race? Both Ferraris
Yes,
got
Malaysia.
thrown out for having like slightly short barge boards or something, and because they got thrown out, Mika Hakkinen and McLaren automatically won the championship a race early, and then
Yeah.
Ferrari appealed and they won their appeal. So over the course of like the 2 weeks before the final race, the Mika Hakkinen was confirmed the winner of the championship and then got it taken away again. It had to go to the final round. It was ridiculous, and we definitely don't want something like that. I think we need to. We're in a sort of tricky balance here, aren't we? Because we want stewards to be as fair and thoughtful as possible about the way they apply penalties, but we also kind of want everything to be done and dusted by the time the flag falls. We don't want to have to be waiting around after the race to find out what the actual result is. That's always annoying. Although I would always want the correct result, like in 2003 when they had to give Fisichella the win about a week later when they realised, oh yeah, he did actually win due to some technicality with red flag rules. I think we all want to kind of know where everyone stands at the end of the race, so people can celebrate and commiserate and be the right people standing on the podium and stuff like that at the end of the race. And then by the time we switch the telly off, everybody knows what's happened. So in that regard, I'm kind of glad we knew where we were, but still.
It's interesting you mentioned the Fisichella Raikkonen incident from Brazil in 2003. Was it Brazil? Yes, it was Brazil.
Yeah.
Because I wrote it down earlier. I was thinking about it. I did wonder if some fans, when they heard that Ferrari were appealing, could picture that moment in their mind on the grid at Paul Ricard as Lewis Hamilton hands over the race winner's trophy from Canada. And I'm thinking, could you imagine? Probably the most awkward exchange we've ever seen. You know, at least the Fisichella Raikkonen one, it was, you know, an underdog getting a win. Two potential title rivals having to go through that would be awkward. But I just wondered if people might have thought that would happen. But you never know in Formula One. You never know. We could get a big surprise on Monday morning when Ferrari confirm the winners. You never know. But I'm just not. I'm not expecting anything from any appeal. But very quickly on this, because I did say we'd talk about this briefly, and it's so far dominated this whole thing. Do you think we need a change for... I don't think they can for next season now. I think they're running out of time. But do you think we need a change for 2021 in some of the rules? I think we've talked about making them more clear, a bit more clarity. And do you think... and you can answer this in the comment section as well. I think I know the answer. Do you think that the current rules in Formula One allow for close wheel-to-wheel racing? I think it suffers.
By rules, do you mean the technical rules or the sporting rules?
As in, technical rules definitely don't. But,
yeah.
I suppose both, but certain sort of, I suppose, keeping Canada in mind, the sporting rules. A driver's having to second guess, they're having to think twice about a move through fear that they might get a penalty, whereas if maybe not the penalties are relaxed, but if things are a bit clearer or they're allowed to get a bit closer, there's allowed to be a bit of wheel rubbing and things like that. Rubbing is racing, as everyone was saying after Canada.
No, yeah, I know. This is another one of those cases where you're like, there's two sides to this. So on one side, yes, rubbing is racing. I think people should be allowed to get, as long as it's not, it's supposed to be a non-contact sport, but if you've got a little bit of side-by-side action, wheel against wheel, and just a little bit of pushing as you fight for space, I think that's not only fine, I think it's quite exciting and interesting. If you watch Formula E, that's basically every overtake. On the other hand, you still need to account for dangerous and malicious driving.
Yeah.
Which is, I think this kind of like with rules in real life as well, there's always someone who ruins it for everyone else. Someone
usually
makes a dangerous maneuver, swerves over the track or does something crazy in the braking line, and then the FIA have to be super strict about moves and stuff, and everyone suffers and has to think hard. I think when it comes down to it, the drivers don't actually think that much about whether they're going to get penalised or not in the heat of the moment. But I tell you what they do think about in the heat of the moment is, get on the radio and say, did you see what he did? Did you see what he did? He moved across the track, or he did this thing, or he braked really late, or that was really dangerous, or that, I think that's the culture we need to kind of avoid. I think we need to stop being these weird kind of tattletale people and just sort of, for the most part, get on with it. I think because there's a lot bundled up in the trickiness of wheel-to-wheel racing, which includes the technical regulations and the design of the cars. That means a lot of the drivers know their only chance to kind of get a position sometimes is by dobbing their fellow drivers in.
Being a grass, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's right because they know that the stewards are going to be listening, don't they? That's kind of a precedent that's been set. But let's not get into technical regulations. I think a lot of people agree that the technical regulations do not allow for close racing. And I still think, I will say, I think we touched on this the other week, I still think there's question marks over the 2019 regulations because a number of drivers, and by a number I think two, but that's still a number of drivers said after Canada they couldn't follow very well. So they've tried, bless them. I think they've just got it wrong again, but
I don't think it's made anything worse. I think they did what they could. It may have improved things. It's as we know, the designers will claw things back and try and undo whatever the changes tried to do. So I don't think it's taken anything away. And I think the big thing is that the extra sort of boosted DRS hasn't been too powerful. It hasn't sort of overblown everything, which I think was the big worry.
Yeah.
That every overtake would be this sort of mega DRS overtake that kind of killed actual racing.
Some might argue that it's improved a little bit, but it's certainly not improved to sort of the amount that they were planning or they were hoping, the FIA, when they came up with these rules. But I completely agree with you. It's not made anything any worse. So we're no worse off than we were 12 months ago. But we'll move on. Should we talk about 2021? I think we should. We've been talking about Canada and penalties for all that long. I think we should. It'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I think we'll be the only ones talking about 2021 by the sound of things.
Yeah. Well, as I said at the start, there were a few interesting little tidbits that came out over the weekend, but obviously that's all been lost in what happened on Sunday. The rules sign-off for 2021 now looks likely, I've written here, to be delayed until October. It was supposed to be signed off by the end of June, but teams have pushed for it to be pushed back to the end of October. The thinking behind it, essentially, as far as I understand it, anyway, Stuart, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, but basically, I think Ferrari and Ferrari in particular have said it, but a number of teams also have said, basically, these aren't quite ready yet. They're not refined, so we need to do a little bit more tweaking and whatnot, and it's better to get it right and delay it than it is to just sign them off as they are. They're a bit immature, I think, is the word that Ferrari used to describe them.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I think there's a bit of an argument among different teams over whether to just get on with it or not. I know Renault are particularly angry that it looks like they're going to be pushed back to October. I think the first thing that comes out of this is you start to ask, do the teams have too much say in what's going on? Why are the teams sort of telling the FIA to push these things back and having all the power? And part of the reason is the teams are helping to develop these rules. The FIA have given the teams extra wind tunnel time purely to work on 2021 simulations and share their findings and so they can shape the rules around that. But also part of the reason is the teams kind of will always try and steer the rules a little bit in the direction that favors them. I think some of them don't want that much change, and some of them don't want particular changes they think won't suit them. So there's always this little bit of a legal battle going on behind the scenes. I think Renault have accused Ferrari and Mercedes of not actually wanting many changes and basically hoping that the more they postpone it, the less dramatic the changes will be. But it's all a bit of a farce, really. I mean, everybody knew the deadline was June. It's been June for about 18 months. So what the hell have they been doing?
Well, it's interesting you bring up Renault. I did the news roundup on Thursday, which is today as we're recording it, but a couple of days ago if you listen to this. And Cyril Abiteboul said that he feels that the rules should be set in stone unless, and I'll quote him here, people are not acting in good faith and are willing indeed to get something different from what has been, we believe, agreed. So no, Cyril Abiteboul is not happy at all. There's a bit of concern, isn't there, from the teams lower down, that the big teams are trying to get around this cost cap or trying to find a way to get it removed. And so by pushing back to October, they've got more time to negotiate it with the FIA. The cost cap, by the way, is apparently set at 175 million at the moment. Christian Horner said on the pit wall to Sky that he wants, or the top teams wanted nearer 200 and the midfield teams wanted 150, so it's ended up as a bit of a compromise. And that is a word which I'm hearing way too much, Stuart, regarding 2021. And it's back to what you just said about teams having too much of a say. Too much compromise, and you're going to end up with a halfway house when it comes to the rules, and it's just not going to work. The FIA, and I've said this from day one, and I'm not going to get ranty, but I've said it from day one, they just needed to do the rules, slap them on the table and say, there you go, sign that. If you're interested, wicked. If you're not, then thanks for your service. We'll see you around. And I'm pretty much sure most teams would have signed up to it, if not all of them. I just think compromise is a dangerous thing when it comes to making the rules, because the FIA risks trying to please everybody and ending up pleasing nobody.
I mean, the whole saga of these 2021 rules has has been a bit of a soap opera, and not one that puts anyone in a good light. I think these 2021 rules are some of the most important regulations we're going to see, or at least they're definitely, this 2021 sort of milestone has been on the calendar for years and years. And originally it was about the next revision for the power units, and part of it was about bringing new people into the sport and how would that look, and can we attract Porsche and Audi and all these people who Aston Martin might be interested. And that kind of all collapsed and fell apart, and they couldn't convince any of those suppliers or manufacturers that F1 was worth getting involved in. So then it sort of became this, how do we make F1 awesome again? And it was like Liberty's first big rule change as well. So we've got, how do we make the power units affordable and sort of relevant to the sport, but also not so dramatically changed that they become super expensive, but still on track to this kind of whatever path they're kind of trying to take with these hybrid engines, and how can we improve overtaking and change the aerodynamics so that racing improves, because we've gone down a dead end with what we're currently doing. And how do we make the cars look cool because we've stuck halos on and the wings are massive and everyone's complaining and we're going to get the teams involved because they've got all the wind tunnels and simulators, so they're going to be able to help us out. And now it's just this kind of big mess. And I mean, I don't know how many people know what the cycle time of car development is, but October is ridiculously late.
It is.
Like, if this was a normal season, Mercedes would have already started working on their 2021 car. Most of the big teams will have started their 2021 programs by now. As time goes on, we'll shift more and more people from their 2020 car to 2021 car. Not knowing the regulations by the winter of this year is madness, and will favor the big teams who have the resources to be able to put lots of people on, to basically make the split program. So you've got a 2020 team and a 2021 team, whereas, Williams can't do that. Racing Point can't do that. Renault probably can't do that. They're actually quite lean in their budgets. It's not particularly fair, and I don't think it's going to be particularly helpful. And if we also get this big compromise on the rules that takes away a lot of the value in what people are trying to achieve by 2021, then this is when you start to worry that it's going to end up being a little bit of a mess. I don't want to be pessimistic, but, the worries creep in.
You look at like the cost cap, and you've just said there about leaving it late and then people pumping the resources in. The cost cap doesn't come into effect until 2021. So Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari, if they want, they could spend €1 billion, $1 billion if they want, on getting the car right for 2021 and turn up in Australia that year with a car that's 3 seconds quicker than the midfield, because there's no cost cap up to that point. They could spend what they want. So
yeah, you could make a forward investment, couldn't you?
Yeah, dare I say that maybe the correct or a better way to go, or a fairer way to go. Is anything fair anymore? Let's not get onto that. But yeah, maybe a fairer way to go about it would be to say, right, the cost cap comes into effect from 2021 and the rules change in 2023 or something like that. But if they're going to do that with the cost capping, because at the moment now, I just don't see much change. I'm trying not to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can about it, but I'm just not. When I first heard of the plans, I went, wow, this is going to be brilliant. This is just what F1 needs. And then every week something else gets announced and you're like, oh, that's a shame. Oh, damn, that's not good. 175 million whatever cost cap, great, but it could have been lower. Why can't it be 150 million? Because Ferrari and Mercedes didn't like it. Well, that's not how it works.
You're right. And I think, as we said, the teams have too much to say. I think the FIA could have easily gathered information, slapped a bunch of rules together by the end of June and said, this is it. This is what we're doing. Because I actually don't think they need to be that dramatic, to be honest. I think part of it is just undo what they did in 2017 for a start, slap a cost cap on, maybe make some aesthetic changes. They seem to be obsessed with that right now. It's sort of making the cars look sexier, but teams will find a way to undo that, because they always do. And just get on with it, and maybe just put in another note and say 2025 we'll do another evolution of that based on what we learn in 2021 and those 4 years since. I don't know why it's such a mess right now and why it's taking so long. I think what comes to mind, someone wants, I think this you know how sometimes you learn sort of life lessons in high school that just stay with you forever. I remember
Yeah.
someone telling me, like, if you get one person working on a project, then it's going to be very, very difficult. You get 3 or 4 people, then they're all going to work together and it's going to be great. But then if you get 7 or 8 people, it all starts to fall apart because that's too many people working together. I think this is sort of where we are at right now. We've got too many parties with too many agendas pulling in different directions and trying to game each other out.
I mean, even if we keep it simple, you've got the top 3 pulling a different way to the rest of the field. So that's without 10 different teams with 10 different plans in them. I was just going to say then, by the way, I'd much rather have an ugly car, lots of overtaking and really close racing than a sexy car and everyone just follows each other home. Might be in the minority there, but I'm not bothered about really good looking cars. I mean, even with the Halo, I think the cars we've got now look pretty awesome, but I would much rather have, with the exception maybe of the phallic noses. I'd rather not bother with that again, but yeah.
Do you remember the change between 2008 and 2009? I mean, the 2008 cars kind of looks a bit similar to the way they do now, but 2009, they kind of elongated the front wing. They made the rear wing tall and narrow. They took away like loads of aero.
Yeah.
And the cars looked really odd when they first appeared. They looked so weird and everyone was like, oh no. But then the racing like improved dramatically. It was so much better and everyone just kind of forgot because it was all so exciting again. So, you know, I think as with the Halo, we just accept what we see.
Well, 2009 and 2010 are probably 2 of the best seasons of the last decade, and the cars didn't look good. You know, so yeah, I completely agree. The other thing, by the way, that came out of the weekend, parc fermé conditions. What was Sky calling it? Run what you brung. Something like that was what they were calling it in practice.
That's great.
Run what you brung. Basically, the minute the car hits the track on a Friday, it's in parc fermé and you can change essentially nothing. I think it's just little tweaks to the front wing and bits like that, obviously unless there's some severe damage and then whatever, but I would assume that would mean you end up at the back of the grid. It's an odd one, but if you then throw into the mix something which I found out today, which I completely missed over the weekend, apparently Liberty and the FIA are looking at ways to get teams or force teams via the regulations to run rookies in 2 Friday practice sessions a season. Not every Friday practice session, but in 2 a season, meaning that even Mercedes and Ferrari would have to run a junior driver twice during a season in FP1 to get them some more track time, which funnily enough George Russell wasn't too keen on. But anyway, that's maybe a story for another day. It was actually in the news roundup, funnily enough. But yeah, when they talk about changing Fridays, I was thinking reducing them, not making things absolutely insane and going down the run what you brung route and putting the kids in there. So I was a bit surprised to hear both of these. I'm not sure, to be honest, Stuart, that I like this idea of putting the cars in parc fermé. I know they're thinking it might mix up the grid a little bit if somebody turns up with a bad car, but if you turn up to, let's say, Canada, for example, Mercedes turn up with a car that's 1 second quicker than everybody else, and Ferrari are 2 seconds off that because they've gone the wrong way with their car, you're not going to get a great weekend and you're going to know by Friday lunchtime. So I don't like that idea. I think also, what's the point in practice if you can't change anything other than just running the tyres?
Yeah, it's an interesting, isn't it? I hadn't heard the thing about the young drivers, but I'm generally quite up for just shoving young drivers in the cars on Fridays as much as possible. I mean, hell, like if they're in parc fermé conditions, just make Friday's young driver day. Do it. Make Saturday practice the first time. But I guess the crowd have paid to see the Hamiltons and Vettels of the world.
True.
Anyway, my first take on this is that I think it's their way of attempting to have their cake and eat it, because we've spoken about shortening or abolishing Friday practice because it gives them too much information, and they run all their data through a computer on Friday night and can basically know what's going to happen on Sunday. And the times when Friday's been a bit of a washout, or there's been sort of accidents and stuff, and people haven't been able to get a gauge on what's happening, qualifying and the race have been a bit more mixed up and a bit more exciting. But as we said, people pay money to go to the track on Friday, and they expect to see Formula One cars, Formula One drivers. So I think that what this is trying to do is have both of these things at the same time. So you've got your Friday practice, but the information you're gathering is not massive, other than how long your tires are going to last. I don't know. I'm not that anti it. I know the teams are very anti it, but the teams are just want loads and loads of data. That's what they want.
They're anti everything now, aren't they? Really, the teams.
They are. They hate change. It's really hard to predict consequences of things. If it does sort of lock the teams out of knowing too much, or even if they do know a lot, they can't actually do anything about it, then that could be interesting. It's really hard to know which teams sort of are best evolved over the race, because over the weekend, like we see Mercedes really come to form on the Saturday, but are they sandbagging or do they learn a lot? Are they really good at data analysis on Friday and they're like, okay, we figured out what the program is on Friday night, and they turn up on Saturday and have the car nailed to the track? Or are they just like pootling around on the Friday and just pretending they're not fast? It's the kind of thing I would probably be quite pro, because it's not quite artificial, but it injects a level of randomness into it that people just have to deal with. If Renault or Racing Point could turn up and happen to be tuned into the track with the parts and the setup they brought, and great, Renault get to have a good weekend. And it's a little bit of luck, but it's also pre-planning, isn't it? Yeah. It's not going to be complete luck. It's not going to be like they just have a randomized grid. And Ferrari and Mercedes would still be strong, and they just have to deal with the fact that things are not as they were at the previous race. So I don't think it's all bad. I think this is, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. It's sort of not the worst thing, and I can see what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, and from a cost-cutting point of view as well, it makes good sense. I mean, I'm not totally against it. My biggest concern, or one of my biggest concerns, is what running are they going to do? If, are we going to get a situation where Hamilton goes out and Vettel goes out and they do their quali run and then they go back and they sit in the pits for the rest of the session? Maybe Bottas goes off and has his porridge. Vettel gets bored and starts swapping around driver boards above garages. That sort of thing. Are they just going to get incredibly bored and not really do anything, and then they're not on track? Are we going to end up in a situation where they go and do their race run over the course of 40 minutes and then they don't go out for the rest of the session because they don't need to put that mileage on the car? I think there would need to be an incentive to force them out of the garage for the session. Otherwise, we are just going to see like the old qualifying days, not probably even more dramatic or even less time on track, when they used to have the 12 laps, 1 hour, and they used to sit in the garage for the first 20 minutes of the session because they're waiting for best track conditions. That would be my worry with it in practice. But then practice is very much filler when it comes to commentary and TV coverage anyway, isn't it? So we're really missing that much from a fan perspective on TV. At the circuit you would, but not necessarily on TV. I
think we still have to bear in mind that one of the most important things through the weekend, but particularly on race days, is understanding, tyre evolution during a race, during a stint, how the tyres are behaving with the track at different temperatures and under braking and things. So I think they'll still be trying to gather a lot of information about how the tyres work and how to get maybe the best out of them, but they might have to shift their sort of thinking to how do we drive the best out of these tyres rather than how do we make micro adjustments to the camber and the wings and the suspension to get the most out of the tyres. And I think that the drivers will want to become as familiar as possible with the way that the tyres and the car are reacting underneath. They've still got 3 compounds to sort of fiddle with and understand. So I still think you would see track running. I just think their focus, with a bit of luck, might shift onto actual driving, and they'll be like learning strategies for how to drive the tyres if their cars are not quite what they need to be. And I think that's, and again, like a lot of their tyres are designated only for practice anyway.
Yeah.
So the only thing they risk is that bombing it into the wall on a Saturday morning and not being able to do qualifying. And of course, they'll still be able to change, repair the car if they do have a crash. They just have to get it signed off by the FIA that, they're not allowed to do anything without it being signed off. So, I don't think the danger's as high as that. I don't think we're going to see many empty tracks. And I think, if Ferrari and Mercedes start to take it easy, that's just more incentive for the lower teams to put in the mileage and try and get one up on them by understanding the tyres better. So I don't think it, in my mind, theoretically, it was going to be too much of a disadvantage. Again, sometimes you have to see things play out on track to know just how bad they are, like elimination qualifying.
Yeah, sounds great on paper, just did not work that at all, did it? But do Fridays need to change much? I know a few people, we've discussed it before on the channel, a few people have sort of brought up the point that maybe we need to reduce practice times in general for the teams, but then the counter argument to that, as we've already touched on, is that then people that have paid a hell of a lot of money to go and watch these in the grandstands then get less time with cars on track. I think Ben, who we had on a stream a few weeks ago from Late Breaking, said that maybe in that case make Fridays F2 and F3 day, where you just run all their races on a Friday and that is their day, and then Formula One starts on the Saturday. There's even talk, I think they were talking about the weekend, possibly Ross Brawn, I might be wrong, but somebody was talking about the weekend about shortening. In fact, no, it's Christian Horner. I'll tell you, it was Christian Horner who mentioned it. Maybe, and I think Gunther Steiner did in the press conference as well. Maybe starting on the Saturday, getting rid of Fridays, press conference Friday, qualifying and practice on a Saturday, maybe a 2, some even said 3-hour session. Some were suggesting on a Saturday, which is a bit excessive, but yeah. Then you've got your practice and your qualifying Saturday, race Sunday, keep it all short, and that way they can then have more races on the calendar, which I'm not sure we need, but that's sort of their thinking behind it. It frees up some days. But does it need to change? I guess is what I'm asking. The weekend format. Are we? I'm saying this as a fan of F1 since '92, so I'm not going to do the maths on that. It's been a while. A long-term fan of F1, and I like things the way they are. I like things to be. That is a Formula One. It starts on a Friday, finishes on a Sunday. But for younger fans, newer fans, casual fans, 3 days of F1 a bit much, maybe.
I am not a traditionalist as much as some people. I think. Because F1 is a sport of change, because it evolves and changes with things like technology and stuff, I think we need to sort of adapt the rules around it and the way it's run around it and respond to maybe some stagnation. While I do like to see the cars on track as much as possible, I do think the only thing stopping me from being 100% behind basically getting rid of Friday practice completely is the need to see the cars running and fans coming in and getting their full 3-day weekend experience. As with things like aerodynamics, I think F1's got itself into a position where advancements in technology have had detrimental effects that you can't take back because you can't undo technology easily. So in the same way that advanced aerodynamics has caused all this dirty air and you can't unlearn that because teams will always try and take advantage of the aerodynamics they understand, advancements in data capture and processing have meant that they learn way too much during practice sessions, and it makes the rest of the weekend less unpredictable and less on your feet. It's very much, we know exactly how long the tires are basically going to last. We know how they're going to react to temperature. We know how our car behaves under braking for every single corner. We know how the Ferrari's behaving. We know how the Red Bull's behaving. So we're very adaptable and we can react, and we know exactly which lap to stop on. And we know exactly what delta we need to pull out, depending on what the Ferraris are doing and so on. And so it takes away some of the mystery we used to have not even that long ago, like 10 years ago. And as we've sort of seen, some of the only way to get rid of that and to bring some unpredictability back into the sport on the days that really matter, which is Saturday and Sunday, is to stop them gathering information on the Friday. As much as it pains me to say, get rid of Fridays. I don't know how you fix that otherwise, other than this kind of ideas like they've been suggesting, like just actually you can't change your car on a Friday, so good luck.
It's so difficult, isn't it? Trying to find the right balance. So I'm genuinely, hand on heart, so pleased I am not sat in any of these meetings. Apart from I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I'd love to hear what's being said, but I would not want to be in there making any decisions because getting the balance right is difficult. But 2021, I think going back to what you sort of touched on earlier, feels to me like the most important year for Formula One's long-term future, possibly in my lifetime of watching it. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, safety obviously was hugely important anyway, but particularly after 94, so big changes there. But this feels absolutely huge, 2021. I wonder if Liberty are feeling that pressure and they're, as I said earlier, trying to keep too many people happy, and I just wish they'd just bite the bullet and say, this is what it is. Let's go for it, because I don't think Formula One, controversial opinion perhaps, but I don't think Formula One is in as bad a shape as some people make out. I don't think it's the worst it's ever been in. I can certainly think of worse seasons that we've had in Formula One. But at the same time, there's a lot that could do with changing. It could definitely be improved. And, you have to keep improving as well. You can't just stop and go, right, that's perfect, let's leave it at that. But I just feel like 2021 is massive. But I've ticked everything off my list, Stuart. I don't know if there's anything I've missed from the weekend regarding 2021, if you've got anything on your list.
No, I mean, I think we've gone through the similar things that I had in my list. I think we're all on the same page with this. On your last point, I think, I agree with you. I think 2021 is this really important year for regulations, but I think there's a danger of kind of overeating the pudding a little bit and just having a bit of backstage panic, maybe, that they need to be like so perfectly perfect and solve every problem and make F1 the best it's ever been, where really you don't. You need to improve a few things. You need to kind of keep one eye on the future. Not people get wary when I say that, and not necessarily think we're going to be electric cars eventually. Let's not go down that avenue, but think how's technology progressing? How is the sport progressing? Where do we want to be in 2025, 2030? How do we want the sport to grow? So you need to kind of have a little thought to think about that rather than think about what's wrong with it now. But F1 being a technology-based sport is always going to be evolving. So every rule change you bring in, whether it's minor ones like in 2019 or whether it's sort of a suite of revolution that 2021 looks like it's going to be, it's still one step along the route. It's still going to keep moving. It's still going to keep changing. We'll have different cars in, 5 years later. We'll have different cars in 2030, and this, I don't think the sport will ever stop changing because it has to respond to not only technology but safety and the types of tracks we go to and things we learn. So I don't think they need to put all of their I'm not sure I'm going with this analogy, but they don't need to bet the entire house on these regulations. They just need to make a good improvement and a good foundation on which to move forward from.
No, that is a very fair point. And I guess kind of to contradict my original point, if it all goes wrong in 2021, it doesn't work. There's always 2022. I mean, what have we had?
Exactly.
2014 massive rule change, then 2017 pretty substantial rule change. 2019, a little tweak, but still a fairly substantial rule change. Then they're changing again in 2021. There were little tweaks from 2009 to 2014 with, blown exhaust and things like that. So even if blown diffusers and stuff like that. But yeah, if it all goes wrong, they'll fix it. And I completely agree with technology and whatnot. It's changing anyway. So it just feels big. But I don't know if that's because of the way that Liberty are building it up and I think it's actually, I'll tell you what it is. It's because it's their first one. It's their first crack at a Concord agreement. So that's maybe why it feels bigger.
To be honest, I think F1 could benefit from, whether it's funded by the teams as part of their agreement to sign up to it or taken out of the prize fund or whatever, making sure they always have a pair of mule cars, a pair of cars, Formula One cars that are set to the regulations or set to future regulations or can be modified, that they can, hire a couple of test drivers, run them round Jerez or Paul Ricard or something, test out, their ideas, because they can't do that. They don't have cars. They should just get some regulation cars and start fiddling with them. I don't know how hard that could be, but it can't be that hard.
I'd never even thought about that. No, because they'll all be on computer, won't they? They'll all have done it all that way and put numbers in and gone, oh, that'll work. And then, oh, nope, it didn't. It seems to be the way it works in Formula. But no, that's a very good point, because it can't be that hard to get hold of even a year-old car. Surely they could, say to, I don't know, Racing Point, can we have one of your 2018 cars, please? We'd like to run some tests on it. Here's X amount of dollars. Then I suppose then you've got the argument that the FIA funding Racing Point. But yeah, I don't know. But
I mean, however you fund it or however you do it so that it's fair, I think it's like, when Pirelli joined Formula One, Toyota had just left, and they basically used Toyota cars to run around and test their tyres, which was fair because Toyota would learn nothing because they weren't even in the sport. It's, I'm sure they can buy old chassis or old things and modify them to get them up to, whatever they need to test. I don't know. There's enough money among the teams to sort of put a pool together.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's a very good idea. It would just, computers are great. Projections and whatnot are fantastic, but nothing can beat getting a car on a track, can it? And going, oh, it does work. Even wind tunnels. How many times do teams test something in a wind tunnel, then put it on the car and it doesn't react the way they were expecting? So maybe, I like that. I'm totally for that. I can't afford to buy a car for them, but I'm sure they can get the money together to do it for themselves. But I think we'll leave it there. I think we're done on 2021. I think we're done on Canada. I will say, actually, now, I can't speak for Stuart, but I can speak for the F1 word. I'm not talking about that penalty anymore in Canada. It's dominated this week. There was a race reaction. There was the debrief. It was even in the news roundup, and it's been in this one. So I'm just going to, for me, I'm drawing a line underneath it and moving on, but I'd imagine nobody else is, and it's probably just going to be me, and my comments will be filled with lots and lots of stuff about Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton and that penalty. But yes, it's kept us talking, as we said at the start, Stuart, and that's kind of what Formula One wants, isn't it? A lot of attention on it, and maybe not the best attention, but people say they're switching off. My gut feeling is that the French Grand Prix could be some of their biggest figures of the year, because people want to tune in and see the fallout, because we are, as a species, a curious type, is probably the way to put it.
Yeah, and I think angry reactions Formula One are normally tied in with excitement and debate. And actually, this gives us an opportunity to interrogate, what Formula One is, what the rules are, what we actually believe. You have something that comes along that shocks us or makes us angry. We ask why that makes us angry and what do we actually want, which I think is good and healthy. And even though discussions have been very aggressive in some corners of the internet, I think a lot has come out of them, and we sort of learned a lot.
Imagine social media in 1989 after the Japanese Grand Prix. Just for 1 second, and then never think of it ever again, because it's the most terrifying thought. Thank you very much, Stuart. It's been nice to sit and just chat randomly and waffle on about rules and whatnot. Not a topic, I guess, but it was just nice to kind of get a few bits off my chest and look at 2021 and try and be positive to a point. I think I'm still quite pessimistic on it all, but it was nice to just have a little bit of a ramble.
Yeah, I always enjoy these chats. I think I'm as much as it may not sound like, I'm actually quite optimistic in general of Formula One. I just put things under scrutiny as they should be. But yeah, thanks for having me along. I always enjoy these podcasts.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you for coming along. Like I say, nice to have a chat, and I'm sure I'll talk to you shortly. Thank you very much again.
Cheers, Sean. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, as always, to Stuart, and thank you, of course, to you guys for tuning in as well. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget you can listen over on Spotify and SoundCloud. And if you're listening on Spotify and SoundCloud, don't forget you can watch over on YouTube. 3 platforms. What more do you want? I'm sure there'll be plenty of other platforms you'd like me to add it to, but nothing's off the table. Just seeing how these go down, and so far the reception's been pretty solid. So thank you very much for all your support with these podcasts, and this week as well. Thank you for your support on the debrief. Some interesting comments, but the vast majority of you have been very up for debate and been very respectful with it, so thank you very much for that one. Now, I will be back on, where are we? We're Saturday when this goes out, so I'll be back on Tuesday with another video. Of course, then we're gearing up for a back-to-back French Grand Prix followed by Austria, and if you enjoy your Formula E as well, there's the Burn EP thrown in the mix as well, so lots coming up on the channel over the next couple of weeks. Don't forget, you can follow me, of course, over on social media. The links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.